Let's go to the screen. Imran, are you on? Mr. Riza? If we could plug in a guest. There we go. Hi, we see you. Hopefully you hear us. As mentioned, we're delighted to be joined by Imran Riza, our resident and humanitarian coordinator for Lebanon. Mr. Riza is here to brief you on the very challenging humanitarian situation in Lebanon, but also just to note that obviously Lebanon for the UN has a political file, which is being handled by our special coordinator in Lebanon, has a peacekeeping file, in which UNIFIL and our peacekeeping colleagues are in the lead. But Mr. Riza is here to talk to you about the humanitarian end of the situation. So Imran, please welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Steph. Very pleased to join you today to update on the humanitarian situation in Lebanon. And I also actually share my impressions from a mission to southern Lebanon yesterday, which we undertook to mark World Humanitarian Day. Some of you in the room might recall that I was last with you in person in New York on the 5th of October last year. And at that point, I was talking to you about the needs in Lebanon and how Lebanon was pretty much off the radar in terms of attention and focus. Look at where we are today. It has unfortunately changed in a very negative manner. Over the past 3 weeks, tensions have been at their highest peak. The urgency of de-escalating tensions cannot be overstated. As the Secretary General has said, all efforts should lead to a return to calm across the blue line. 10 months on, nearly 200,000 people have been displaced by the exchange of fire across the blue line, including more than 110,000 people in Lebanon. Nearly 150,000 people remain within 10 kilometers of the blue line in areas of South Lebanon that are impacted daily by shelling and airstrikes. At least 130 civilians have been killed in Lebanon, including the 10 Syrian nationals this past weekend. 21 paramedics and at least 3 journalists have also been killed. Yesterday, to commemorate World Humanitarian Day, I traveled to Heberia in South Lebanon, to the site of a relief center where 7 paramedics were killed in a March airstrike. As you can imagine, it was quite emotional discussing with the mothers of these 7. We keep repeating the message. More needs to be done to end these hostilities, to find a diplomatic political solution, and immediately and continuously to protect civilians and humanitarian workers. I'm here today to speak of the humanitarian situation, our challenges, our needs. And while civilians are, of course, impacted on both sides, I will be speaking of the situation in Lebanon, where I am the humanitarian coordinator. As I briefed you last time, Lebanon was already facing a grim situation of protracted political, financial, socioeconomic crisis before October last year. Now, in 2024, those in need have reached 3.7 million people. This includes crisis-affected Lebanese, Syrians, Palestinians, other migrants. The conflict has further eroded the capacity of the state to tackle political, economic, and security challenges and to provide basic services to the population. In Heberia, as in other communities that I've visited over the past 10 months, I have seen and heard the distress of those remaining and those displaced. People's livelihoods have been devastated, their access to water, electricity, and healthcare has been affected. Children and parents are suffering psychological trauma. Some students are able to access education only online, most not at all. In this volatile and complex operating environment, the humanitarian community in Lebanon is responding to the needs of the displaced, as well as those remaining in frontline areas, despite the insecurity, despite the access challenges, and the lack of funding. Our annual appeal for assistance for all of Lebanon is, at this point in August, only 25% funded. Nonetheless, we have managed to reach 1 million people with assistance and support so far this year, including at least 180,000 people affected by the conflict in South Lebanon. We continue to do our best to improve our ability to reach people in need, strengthening our coordination, prioritizing our efforts to target the most vulnerable, negotiating access for assessments and distributions, but we need more resources and funding. As a humanitarian country team, we need $110 million to finance the ongoing response for up to 290,000 conflict-affected people in Lebanon. That's the estimate that we have from now, from August through the end of the year. Despite the challenges they are facing, I would like to recognize and commend the government leadership on coordinating preparedness and response plans. An important meeting was convened by the relevant national authorities on the 7th of August, bringing together government, humanitarian partners, and also the private sector. As agreed then, should there be a further escalation, we will need even more. In terms of preparedness, right now we are calling for an additional $36.4 million to pre-position food, water, medicines, and non-food items such as hygiene kits and shelter materials for immediate use in case of escalation. I'll close by just saying I think the obvious. A full-scale war in Lebanon would be devastating. We desperately need success on the political, diplomatic front. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Imran. We'll go to Edie.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. Before I ask my question, could you tell us how much the humanitarian appeal is? I know you said it was 25% funded, but what is the appeal? And then you said you're now asking for another $34 million in addition, and I want you to just clarify that.
Okay, it's just it's 2.72 billion with the overall appeal that is there for all our work in Lebanon on the humanitarian and stabilization side. We are asking, in addition to that, for $36.4 million, which would be for preparedness, which would be for pre-positioning essential supplies. Because we do worry about the situation escalating. It's the prudent thing to do, given the experiences that we had in 2006, when it was very difficult to move around.
You said at the end that a full-scale war would be devastating. What is your assessment of the situation now? We hear that it's been escalating, and do you see people on the ground making preparations also? Thank you.
We've been in this situation for 10 months. We've had certain periods that have been extremely escalatory. There have been others where we've just seen a continuation of this so-called controlled exchange that's been happening. I think the last few weeks have been extremely alarming. Throughout, we have been making contingency plans and trying to prepare. There is, I think, a very, very high degree of anxiety, of uncertainty. Certainly, a few weeks ago, we saw the sort of accelerated departure of many people that were here for the summer. So, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball on this. What we need to do is prepare for a continuation of what we've been dealing with for the last 10 months, but we also need to prepare should it go to a much higher level of escalation, which, of course, would be devastating.
Thank you. Ephraim?
Thank you so much. I have a couple of short questions. The 3.7 million people who are affected so far, does that include the Syrian and other refugees in the country, or are we talking about just Lebanese here?
No, that does include everyone. It includes Palestine refugees. It includes what the estimate that we're using these days is 1.5 million Syrians that are there.
Yeah.
And of course, a small number of migrants as well.
Yes, and the $36 million that you need to pre-position the essentials, should a scenario similar to the 2006 when Israel imposed the complete siege on the country, how long would that be enough for those essentials? Like, how many months would they last?
What we're doing now is trying to make sure that we have enough to cover the first 2 to 4 weeks if we see a very rapid escalation happening. We would obviously need much, much more than that. And it would be a completely different scale of response at that point.
And the 130,000 southern citizens who are fleeing the south, where are they going? And what do we know about their situation in other areas right now?
At the moment, it's a little over 110,000. And many of them have gone to different communities, people that they know, host families and others within the South. And many have gone actually beyond the South as well. So when we talk about pre-positioning and talk about being prepared, the response is happening very much in the South, but we need to be prepared in other regions as well. Should the displacement continue to increase in some of these other regions.
And one final one, we've read that what the country has now in terms of food and humanitarian aid would last only for 5 months, and in terms of fuel, only for 5 weeks. Is that still accurate? We're reading reports on that in the press.
I don't have the last figures on that, but we have been seeing, I mean, it is a matter of just a few months on that. And as you may have seen in the media, well, amongst yourselves also, that we were without electricity. Any government provided electricity for the last couple of days here.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Imran, you're off the hook. It's a slow August day, so thank you very much for coming, and we hope to hear from you again soon. And for those of you in the room, we have Monica Grayley briefing you now. Thank you. Thank you, Imran.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.